You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington.
Hey y'all, it's your host Erika Washington, and we're replaying an episode from March. A good friend of mine, Aimee Allison, joined me to talk about how we were feeling as Black women and about the state of the world. I think we were both sort of sorting out our feelings and unpacking the weight of what felt like betrayal. And I wanted to return to this conversation as we close out the year. We're fast approaching that time where we evaluate what we did well and what we failed at. Who did we let down? And where could we have shown up and been more present? What goals or resolutions will we commit to for 2026? I think looking back helps us look forward. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did.
Way below acceptable. Way below acceptable.
On this week's episode, with heartbreak, you can break down or you can break open. So whenever they present lynching as Black history, I say, no, that's white history. American democracy never was a true democracy, and Black women know that.
Way below acceptable.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sticky Note Conversations. My name is Erika Washington, and I am your host and the executive director of Make It Work Nevada. Today, we are going to have what I know will be an exciting and invigorating conversation with one of my favorite people. And I know I say that almost every episode, but it might actually be true this week. So I really want to welcome my good friend, Aimee Allison, to Sticky Note Conversations. She is the founder and president of She the People, which is a national organization that builds the power of women of color as leaders of the new American political and cultural era. And her accolades include organizing the nation's first presidential forum for women of color, which I was at, and also igniting the call for Kamala Harris as the VP pick in 2020, and for California's Governor Newsom's appointment of a Black woman to the U.S. Senate. She is a leading national voice on Black women and women of color in our democracy, and is widely acknowledged for her work in getting Black women elected in battleground states. She's also the host of She the People, the podcast with Aimee Allison. I am so excited to talk to you. Welcome, 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 Aimee Allison, to Sticky Note Conversations. How are you,
friend? I'm good. I'm happy to see you, to be on here with you, and being a long admirer of your work with Black people, not only in Nevada, but we've seen each other in a lot of different swing states, all the work that you've been doing. I really want to honor you because, this is a tough time to be a Black woman. It's also an amazing time to be a Black woman because they're not like us. They're just not like us.
Yeah, got to throw that in there. Californian. You know, yes, I have run into you it wasn't even a run into in Texas. Texas was one of the places you had the forum during the election, not the
Texas Southern in Houston. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was exciting. But also running into you on the White House lawn was a very special treat and not something I think we're going to get to do for a good long time.
A really long time. And we were at the White House, remind me now, we were invited to be part of a few hundred people to witness Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson going into the Supreme Court. She appeared with President Biden. She appeared with Vice President Harris. We were out on the lawn. It was a hot day. Remember that day?
What a time to be alive. Every time I'm on the lawn, it's hot. And there's something about DC and those mosquitoes. They tear me up. Every single time I am there.
You say you get the sweet blood.
It's that welcome to DC. You are about to leave with some souvenirs all over your body. But yes, being on the White House lawn, being in the White House, being in the building adjacent to the White House, it is such a surreal experience that you'll always find me on my best behavior. I'll say that first and foremost, being at the White House, because there's so many Secret Service around. They're all so strapped with everything. And they say anything, I'm like, yes, sir. Yeah, I am standing here. My hands are not in my pockets. I have nothing. I am a citizen of this nation and I love my country. That's how I feel when I'm standing at the White House.
I'm telling you, most people haven't had a chance to actually visit the White House. I mean, some people can go as tourists. And for the events over the last 4 years, you and I have been to, They don't understand, the White House isn't that big. It's not that big. And of course, there's a Roosevelt building, as you were saying, right next door. There's probably a network of tunnels that they had to run away from the January 6th insurrectionists underneath that building. But if we look at the White House, it's not that big. And it's larger than life in my imagination when I was younger. When I used to watch President Obama give his addresses in the Rose Garden, which, by the way, where are the roses? There's no roses in the Rose Garden. But anyway, I digress.
There's not. There's not.
Right. And that grassy area. And there are a lot of young Marines, mostly, that, first the Secret Service, you go through all this security before you enter the building and then even to get close. And then there's all these young Marines that greet you and show you the way to walk into whatever the event that we were there. And there's usually this band, Marine Corps band that's playing.
Oh, yes, there is the band. And they are very talented.
Really talented. And it just, when I think of what Trump and MAGA and the criminal, cheating people that have taken over that building in our government, in contrast to just literally just a few months ago. I got to wake up every day. Sometimes I wake up and it's nice and warm here in Oakland. I can hear the birds, and then boom, oh my God, they took over that building. They took over that building. But remember, before they took over, we were there because we pushed so hard. Starting in 2019, before Biden and Harris were even elected and even went into the White House, we pushed really hard for a Black woman to be on the Supreme Court. And we knew how difficult that was going to be, and we knew how important that was going to be. And so I always remember, and I have those pictures. I love Google Photos. I'll go back. I'll tag you, and then I'll go back. It pulls all the photos that we have together, and we've got a lot.
Yeah, you sent me a bunch of them. Yeah, I keep all of my little mementos. I have a napkin from the White House. I've got the little Hershey Kisses, the Joe Biden Hershey Kisses.
You're not going to eat those?
I don't think so. I mean, they might be a little old probably now. So
I have a candle. It smells pretty good.
I don't have a candle.
From Vice President Kamala Harris's office. And then I
never made it to her office.
What's that?
Oh, I said I never made it to her office. I was never in there.
The only time I went to the VP's residence, because look, you and I are West Coast people. Mm-hmm. And when you're in national politics, I hate to say it, but it's all about East Coast. Mm-hmm. Everywhere from New York to Atlanta to DC. And people think on East Coast time. They announce events like 48 hours, 24 hours before they happen. And sometimes we can't jump on a plane like that. So I missed a lot of events. I'm sure you did too. But the vice president's residence is another house. I remember I went right the first year after she took office because COVID had just subsided, and it allowed her to have a International Women's Day event there around the pool. And I would just say that day, my big memory was being there with probably about 100 women leaders from around the country in this place right at the waning months of COVID. And her stepping up on the dais and giving a speech about being the tiebreaker. Remember, the vice president was the tiebreaker her whole 4 years. And that day, she was the tiebreaker for some anti-lynching legislation that made lynching a federal crime that hadn't passed for decades, was first introduced in the 1940s in the wake of horrific lynching, domestic terrorism by whites. And over the decades, it never made it out of committee. And in this case, there was Cory Booker, there was Kamala Harris, and there was a coalition of enough Democrats this time around to pass the legislation. She mentioned Ida B. Wells, and I remember standing there with tears in my eyes because Ida B. Wells, she held a space that Black women continue to hold, which is to bear witness, to write about attacks against our community, and to defend the idea that we have civil rights. And she's long dead. And here was Kamala Harris that day, who had made the anti-lynching legislation federal law. And I'll never forget those days.
It'll never cease to amaze me how long it's taken for these laws to come into place, for there to be any sense of justice when it comes to that. Because when you say it, you have to think that how many years did we go where lynching was not necessarily illegal in that way? Because there's a federal law, there's also state laws, and state laws vary. And a lot of state laws on the books, it wasn't illegal to do, And so just recently, I was in Montgomery, Alabama, about, by the time this airs, it'll be about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I had an opportunity to go to the legacy sites. So the Legacy Museum and the Monument Museum, or the Monument Park. And the experience was overwhelming, to say the least. There's just not enough words for the amount of artifacts and history and knowledge that they've pulled together in these spaces. And in most of the places, you can't take any pictures or video, which I'm not 100% sure why, but I know a part of it is safety, and they also really want people to come. But there was so much to take in that I wanted to be able to take pictures, because I couldn't read everything that was there. And I wanted to follow up on some of the laws and history facts that I didn't even know. And particularly around lynching, there's a whole section of pictures of and video of people being lynched in the South. And it's blurred out, so you have to touch it to make the video go, because it says that the pictures are highly graphic and full of violence. And so you watch through these pictures, and then at the end they say most of these were postcards that people could buy and send. And you could send postcards of Black men, women, and children to your whoever, your loved ones, I guess, and say, I was here. And
Terrible.
I didn't realize that until I was in this museum, that they lynched small children, that there were 4-year-olds, there were newborns that were lynched.
And this, Erika, is presented as Black history, but this is white history. This is the never-ending stream of violence that white people did to prevent Black people from their own dignity, humanity, safety, citizenship, economic independence. And I think this is the kind of thing, going down to Alabama, because I had a chance to also go to the museum and then the memorial. It's very hard, like you were saying, to articulate what it is to walk by these large copper, they almost look like coffins. And as you walk into the memorial, you sink down. You're like going down almost like almost imperceptible hill. And the coffins get taller and taller. And then you look around, and each one of them represents a county where they'd collected soil from lynching sites where those men, women, and children were murdered. And those are there. It's sacred ground, because that's where our ancestors were. But the act of walking through the memorial itself is overwhelming, because the coffins, once you look up, they're everywhere and you're surrounded. And it's the largely unacknowledged history of white people's violence. I grew up, can I just say, I grew up, my mom is white, my dad's Black. And we round up, okay? So we had the one drop rule, always operates. But for me, I learned I was Black from one of those postcards, because when I was really little, I think I was 4, my parents had this picture book. It was almost like a coffee table book called America. And it was written by a British guy who had a PBS series at that time, back in the 70s. And a lot of the pictures had like Grand Canyon, cityscapes, the California coast, waving fields of wheat. But one of the photos was a very famous lynching of 2 boys in Marion, Indiana in the 1930s. And as a little kid, I saw that photo underneath this tree were dozens of white people. Some of them looked bored. Some of them, there was a guy in front looked like Hitler with one of those little mustaches. Some of them looked threatening. Some of them looked happy. And they were under a tree with two, now we know their names, two boys who were about 16, who were mutilated, tortured, and murdered. Accused, as is the story always, it seems like it always is, of something that they were not responsible for. And that moment where I looked at the people around the bottom of the tree, and some of them had this genetic marker called peg laterals, which are like this pointy, you know how you have your teeth? I don't,
The incisor. The incisor.
The second one over is called lateral incisor, not the middle one, but the second one. And in my family, they're pointed. Some of them are pointed, right? It's just a genetic trait. And these people had that genetic trait, okay? Some of them had that peg lateral. And I said, wow, this kind of looks like someone in my family. And in the tree, these poor boys that were already dead also looked like my family. As a little kid, it's hard to process the violence, but I understood and took in that these people were responsible for this horrific violence. So whenever they present lynching as Black history, I say, no, that's white history. That is the history of white people doing everything they can to prevent equality, democracy, justice, fairness, safety. And the fact that right now, Black people are arguing things that, and we're trying to defend things that should have been settled after the South and the Confederacy was defeated, but it wasn't. The fact that right now, Trump and MAGA is looking at the 14th Amendment, they're not trying to take us back to 1950, they're trying to take us to 1850, where our citizenship rights are not guaranteed. 14th Amendment was created after the Union won the Civil War in order to guarantee Black people full citizenship. And right now it's being used, like the challenge in the 14th Amendment is being used against immigrants, Central America, brown immigrants basically, and birthplace citizenship. They're challenging those things. But at its core, this is about Black people's continued expansion and trying to make America respect our full citizenship. And we're still fighting for that. And so the story of lynching for us is like, there's deep trauma. I know I hold trauma, and everything that's happening now is almost like, it's like re-triggering some things. Some things I experienced myself, and some things are in our DNA. We're carrying fear from grandparents. That's proven. So this point in history feels really hard for me. Every day I get up, oh my God, those people, the enslavers, the violent, the vile, the greedy, those people are in charge. And I feel fear. And so I have been just grappling with that and trying to be positive and all that stuff. But
how are you coping?
Honestly, I'm limiting my interactions with people. I can talk to Black women in this moment because not everyone, not 100% of us, but 92%, so that's pretty high, we actually know the deal. We understood before the election, we know now. And you and I, we've been in this work for a long time, and we knew what was going to happen, and we knew what was at stake, and we led the charge. And I feel like I can only talk to Black women right now and be myself. I went to a retreat in December that had a group of Black women who were involved with the Kamala Harris campaign, but had also done the work that we do. And I went hurting, angry, but also like underneath the anger is like a heartbreak. I had dedicated my life, and now I'm 55. I dedicated my entire adult life to making America live up to its greatest ideals, to working toward multiracial democracy, to uplifting Black and brown women. Like my entire career is that. And my heartbreak was seeing this country for what it is, like how many millions of people are people who came from those people underneath the tree. Those people, those terrible people are still running around and planning to do harm. What I'm trying to do and what I was able to do last few months ago, right after the election, when everything was super, super raw for me, was to say, okay, there's a couple of ways I could go. I mean, with heartbreak, you can break down, which is what I was feeling, or you can break open. I feel like now, because I'm talking to Black women, really brilliant people like yourself, really whose heart is so powerful and the vision is so strong, that I can protect that piece of myself that's open to possibility and open to love. And I don't know what it's going to look like right now exactly. I don't have all the answers, but I'm like trying to take care of myself. I'm eating like high protein. I'm drinking water. These are like basics, but I'm taking like magnesium so I can get enough sleep. I'm doing like Bach flower, these little candies that are like help you with stress. I'm lifting weights, heavy weights as I can with my trainer, because I feel like those are the things that help me to cope. I started a little garden. So every day I go outside and I check on my basil and my like early girl plants and my like kale, dinosaur kale that I'm growing.
Oh,
And
I
those
love dinosaur
things,
kale. That's my
those
favorite
things are
kale.
helping me feel like a normal person, but it's a struggle right now. So I don't know how you're doing, but that's how I'm doing.
The election hit me differently than I expected it to. I feel as though I'm used to disappointment, whether that's a good thing or not. I'm used to disappointment. And I didn't know that the outcome would be different. I had a lot of doubts for a lot of different reasons. But when it finally came down to it that day, we have election parties every year or every election. And we have a hotel room and we have food and we gather our folks to celebrate and to be in community with each other. And I paced for so long. And I had this headache that was just like out of this world. I could feel it behind my eyes, and watching the numbers, watching the things come in. And I'm like, oh, it's still early because we're in Las Vegas. So things close early over there. Red states are closing early. The ones that we don't expect to get all of that. But it got to a certain point where I knew, right? The math wasn't math. And I don't even know what to call that feeling. But I knew that next morning, sitting there, being sad, feeling deja vu all over again from the 2016 election, that I don't think I realized until that moment how much I needed to see a Black woman become president, that I needed to see a woman become president, that I wasn't just her, but there's a sense of validation that people see women and Black women and whatever other kind of woman. You see us as whole people who are capable of any and everything. And we already know this to be true. I know this to be true because I'm a woman. I know it's true because I've had children. I know this as a person, but it still feels like we're having to look for basic validation from folks. And I feel like we still haven't gotten there yet, to a point where not just men, there are women also that I read online and reading comments, which went down a lot of different rabbit holes of women saying, I don't think a woman should be president. I don't think she can do it. And whatever that internal struggle with patriarchy is with them, that they believe this. And I think I was devastated a little bit in that moment. Again, it wasn't just because it was Kamala. It felt bigger than that. It felt like existential, that it was just more about, as women, we still haven't gotten to that place. It's always still not enough. We're not enough. And
but
that
we are
feels
enough.
hard.
It's super hard. And how many times growing up did you hear, Erika, go get your education, Erika.
Gotta work twice as hard.
Work twice as hard. And now you realize that was a lie. The whole thing was a lie. And I think part of this period that Black women are in right now, or the majority of Black women are in, is waking up from a spell that even we were cast under. We're the most likely, I believe, to see through the lies, the American story, you know what I mean? Manifest destiny, America's the land of the free and the brave. There was a bunch of stuff that we were told that we knew wasn't true because of our own observations and family histories and things like that. But there were some things that we still believed in that we know are not true.
I said it to my children. I told my children to do my son, thing.
Get your education.
Do the stuff. Yes.
Get your education. Do this and this. Dress this way. Act this way. And now we really know that is not true. And the thing about disillusionment for Black women, and that's like, if you look at the group who believed the most deeply and matched it with our energy and work, Black women were the ones. And for hundreds of years, back before Jefferson had the nerve to have slaves and children with enslaved people, there was Phyllis Wheatley talking about the beauty of democracy that included everyone. I mean, we go back hundreds of years trying to create this thing. But now we are disillusioned. And we know, I know, and a lot of people say, okay, the American project is not something that we can save. And perhaps, as I heard Latasha Brown give a public talk recently, and Latasha Brown being the co-founder with Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter, based in Georgia, and she says it's time for nation building, y'all. It's time for us to imagine what else. And so the saving grace for me is I had to go back and read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. If anyone hasn't read that recently, Octavia Butler and she was in Altadena. She's a Black woman way ahead of her time. She wrote this. She basically started Afrofuturism, didn't she? She basically started the whole.
Yeah, I think she gets the credit for that.
She gets the credit. And she writes this book. And the book is about the breakdown of the United States government. At the same time, it's climate. At the same time, it's society. But she also writes about a Black teenage girl who survives and creates space to dream of what's next. Anyway, it's fiction, but instructive. So I went back and read it this last month. And I'm going back to like Sojourner Truth's speeches. I'm going back to Ida B. Wells. I'm going back to some of our godmothers and saying, God, look at what they lived through. How did they keep so precious that belief? Because we lost, Erika, but we weren't wrong. We were right. And there's a bunch of people who are capitulating to this fascist regime, and they're actually doubting whether diversity, inclusion, equality, democracy makes any sense. You know what I mean? We were right about those things.
Yeah, we are right. Majority of the time, probably 92% of the time, we are right.
You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington.
Thinking about this and thinking about how it feels like we were sold this bill of goods that's not true, and that we perpetuated it. And again, like you said, telling our children. And I had a conversation, actually my very first episode of this podcast, I had a conversation with one of my children, my daughter, who is now 21 and in college. And she talked about how she was afraid that when she graduated, that nothing that she said that she thought would be true, that she wouldn't be able to find a job, she wouldn't be able to afford a place to live. She felt like she was heading towards failure. And she said failure because she's like, if I have to move back home, to me, that feels like failure. And I said, it's not, obviously, and you're welcome. And she understood that, but it still felt like, no, but I did all the things you told me to do. And I graduated early. I went to college. I'm doing all these things. I got, scholarships. yada, yada, yada. But it doesn't feel like I'm going to get the spoils on the other side. And she's right. It is difficult. The price of rent is outlandish. And
Outlandish now.
it's outlandish. And I told my oldest, who is paying an outlandish amount in rent, different kid who is 25, is paying more for a 1-bedroom apartment than I was paying rent when they were younger in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a pool. And I think about what I needed in order to make things work as a single parent and raising these young people and making sure they have what they needed. One of the things I needed was an affordable place to live so I could get back on my feet. And I was able to find that. And that place was the place before this, the place that they spent the most time in. And I think I was paying $800-900 a month in rent. And it was a 2-bedroom house, 1 bathroom. It was tight for us,
But
all
the
of that.
income wasn't
worked.
that much lower, I bet.
Right. No. And I could
you know.
stay there. And I needed that launch pad to get to a point where I could buy a house. What do people have now? What does that single mom right now who has 3 children that are all in school, what does she have to work with? And it frightens me.
And, what can young people, this Gen Z, all right, my son's 27, your kids are in their 20s. What are we supposed to say? Work doubles hard because it's the idea or the fiction of the American dream, which brought so many people here from all over the globe. That's not available to a lot of people. I try not to react to every little thing that's happening out of the White House, but today the executive order is to end a program that was helpful to people who wanted to be in public service. You want to be a teacher, which is a low-paid job in Clark County, for example. My sister is a principal at a middle school in Clark County, but if you wanted to be a teacher in particular zip codes, the federal government had a program through the Department of Education that would forgive loans if you spend a certain number of years there. Same if you worked in a nonprofit that served people that needed help. There was a benefit, and they just eliminated that today. And I think about all the programs like that made it possible for someone like me to go to college but not be saddled with so much debt, or programs that helped me save my house in 2009 when President Obama had the program to help people restructure their mortgages to stay in their house. A lot of people in Vegas, I know, lost their homes. A lot of people out here in Oakland did too, and in between. So, I just look at these young people, the cost, it's not. And I think the limits of us as parents, what can we do? I went through a process because I got married last summer. And when you get married and you're older, sometimes you have stuff. You have retirement, or you got to, I have a house I've had for 20 years. I put stuff in trust. I worked with an attorney to do a whole estate planning that basically said, okay, when I die, this is what I want to happen to the stuff. And here I'm thinking, okay, what I want is I want my son to be able to have property, because I don't know if someone who's 27 now will be able to buy a home. It's too expensive. It's expensive. So I think through these things, but I'm limited. Right now he's living, and right now he has rent, not when I die. That's not the only, you know what I mean? So I feel really sad for this next generation.
Yeah, I feel the same. I was 25 when I bought my first house, and I know that my 25-year-old can't buy a house right now. I want to ask you, what is the American dream to you?
Right now?
What does your version look like?
It's changed radically. Let me just put it that way. The American dream before was a dream in which electing a woman of color, a Black woman, as president was proof that we were on our way to a multiracial democracy. And there was a whole bunch of changes that we'd worked on. But what's it look like for me now is pretty different. It looks like me being a global citizen, Erika, honestly. And I think I'd mentioned to you before, but I was in a fellowship last year called Be Well, Black Women's Executive Leadership. And there were just over a dozen of us, and only 4 of us were American. So we were in a year-long fellowship with people from Ghana and Nigeria and South Africa and in the Caribbean and Canada and Brazil. And we traveled. It was my first time in West Africa. And it was my first time in Salvador de Bahia, which is where the majority of Black people kidnapped from Africa were taken. And it was the blackest place I ever went to. People come from Togo and Cameroon and Ivory Coast and Ghana to Brazil, to Salvador, to study religion and food because it was preserved there more than it was in West Africa because of the ravages of colonialism. And I'm saying all that to say the American dream for me right now is freedom of movement, being able to be a global citizen. Because now I know who I am more because of that experience. Like, a lot of Americans, we feel so isolated. We don't really feel connected to Africa or the African diaspora. And we still had that idea that somehow Americans are special. I hear it all the time, and it's so obvious. And we think as Black Americans, we're like special, but we don't realize that's another spell. That's American individualism, American exceptionalism. And we got to get over it, and we need to get over it right now. And I found out for my own work, I thought, I'm going to be in this global fellowship, and people who are in other countries, they're not going to really relate to what we've been working on. And it turns out, I have things to learn. It turns out the things that we did to build democracy here, and like in Nevada and other places in California and Georgia and other places, is of big interest to Black women across the globe. We got a lot in common. And there's also a lot of women that are entrepreneurs, that are artists, that are building. Like Black women in Brazil, for example, I found out they're doing a Million Black Women March next November, which is like Thanksgiving week for us. And million Black women are getting together 10 years after there was a very high profile murder of a city councilwoman who was an advocate for many things, including Black people who were victims of police violence. And she was murdered. And it turns out she was murdered by 2 police officers. And that sparked a whole movement, and in which 40,000 Black women were elected, hadn't been hardly represented, but were elected to different various levels of government. And now they're doing a Million Woman March to demand reparations. Listen, reparations, okay? And
right. This is in Brazil?
This is in Brazil.
Oh, that's amazing. I want to go.
And I'm going to send you all the information because it's Thanksgiving week, and we, Black women, need to go and be in Brasilia and be with women. So I feel like I got this great gift. And now as America makes these changes, destroys long-standing relationships, justifies genocide and turning Gaza into some kind of resort, just all over the world as things are changing for us. But the thing is that we have this wonderful diaspora that is our family. And Americans, we are not like apart, like separate and apart from that. We are of it. And that's been very exciting for me. So that's what the American dream is for me now.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful dream. And what's interesting about that is you're probably the 4th person in the last 24 to 48 hours that talked about becoming a global citizen and what does it look like to live elsewhere. And people have said it before this as well. But just most recently, someone I know is in Peru. And there's also another person I talked to actually earlier today was talking about it. And she's the only thing that's tying me here are my parents. And my parents not wanting to leave the United States ever, like they don't have passports. And I said, oh, that's terrible. They have to get passports. And she said, they have this thought process that everywhere else is third world compared to America. And they're older folks, I think. And, that American exceptionalism is well ingrained in folks. And it's very scary to think about leaving. And I say, yeah, this is why it's good to travel young and help your children travel so that they can see things that way. My middle one, the one that I just spoke of, the 21-year-old, she has not lived in the United States since 2021, and she has no plans on coming back at all. And every time she's, no, I Like she's divorcing herself from the idea of living in the United States. And she says, I feel safer. And so I don't blame her. I don't blame her.
I remember going in Ghana. I did my 23andMe genetic makeup, and my African ancestry ties to Ghana. As much as anything, I'm like, that's where I could trace ancestors, not part of West Africa.
So what did it feel like to be there?
I can only tell you, okay, so you might relate to this, okay? You organize with Black people, but you live in Nevada. I live in California, okay? Black people are not the majority, okay? We're surrounded by Latinos who the border crossed them, okay? They've been here for generations, and we're surrounded by immigrants. We're surrounded by Asian American, maybe Filipino and other immigrants. My husband's an immigrant from Korea. We're surrounded by people from Central America, okay? And people have a place that they come from. There's an idea of home, even if they've never been to that place. And when I went to Ghana and I was walking around Accra, down the street, and then it's the Gold Coast, okay? Gold Coast. And they call that because millions and millions of our ancestors went through these huge forts, which still stand onto slave ships. But in my mind, my history, me personally, my history started on the bottom of a slave ship. But when I got to Ghana, I know what the trees look like. I know what the air smells like, the land. I know what the water. Do you know the water? You know, the water is like this light baby blue. I'd never seen water like that. And there's a thing inside me, a hole that I did not know was there, that I felt this like longing and this like joy of home. And I came back and I told my friends, my sisters, we have to go to Ghana or anywhere in Africa, because the feeling of that, I thought I was going to feel strange as an American or as a biracial person. I don't know. I'm not going to belong. And it freaking turns out that it's like incredible to be there. And it was even incredible to witness Elmina Castle, which is the Portuguese-built place that 1 million people went through. And to hear the stories, it was incredible to meet young entrepreneurs who have clothing lines. I bought like designer clothing from these young women, and just to hear them talk about like they hustle. Like I got both sides, and so much within me was healed. And I recommend it. I tell people, like, I'm going to South Africa on Thursday. That's how connected I feel and how much I have so much more to explore in the continent of Africa, which is dozens of countries and lots of diversity there. But as an American, I feel like the world has opened up to me in this gorgeous way. And as the U.S. shows how much it hates Black people, yet again, and the U.S. shows how racist it is, yet again, and the forces of white delusion, some people call it white supremacy, and patriarchy, and capitalism, they're at play, there's somewhere for us to go. And for me, that place is like being connected globally. And that is the thing that's giving me hope right now.
That makes me think about democracy and what is it really? Because we use the word a lot and tied to elections, but more so, democracy feels like a way of life and how we function with each other in a democratic way of how we hold meetings or how we discuss things that could be, what am I trying to say? That are things that the things that we try to discuss that we don't see eye to eye on. And we try to come up with a way to be diplomatic. But I'm struggling with what democracy is right now. And if we have it, or do we need to redefine it?
I don't think there's a democracy in the U.S. anymore. And I actually don't think most Americans understand that. Yeah, we should define it, but we should define it like American democracy never was a true democracy, and Black women know that. In our line of work, we already know that. We were trying.
And maybe that's what it is, right? Like, because we were told we were a democracy, but then these things keep happening to us.
Well, I grew up people saying, oh, like slavery was this like exception. Like the founding fathers were still these like super brilliant people who believed in freedom. Oh, they owned slaves, but just ignore that. No, because from the very beginning, it's going to be 250 years next year. From the very, very beginning, American democracy has been flawed. The foundation, and we talked about the 14th Amendment, Reconstruction was the closest in terms of opening up economic and political and like human and civil rights for Black people, and only lasted 10 years. And there's a reason that most of us cannot trace our ancestry to Ghana. I can only trace it to my great-grandfather because in Reconstruction, they made an attempt to have people's marriages legalized and to find lost family members who had been sold to other people, to count Black people in a census. That's the only reason I even know who my great-grandparents are, because my dad's 88. So it's not that long ago. So I don't know. We know this, and we understand that what was American democracy. Now, with the current situation, we cannot come back from that. And the form of government that we have has three co-equal branches, and they are not co-equal branches anymore. We have a Supreme Court that the majority bows to the will of Trump and has already made rulings that say they're going to protect him for all his criminal activity. We have Congress that has already, the majority said already that they will implement his will. And we have state legislative houses, by the way, like in Michigan, who are the majority of people already implement this anti-democratic, fascist government. And very soon, Congress will give its last significant vote. And we watched people of supposedly an opposition party, the Democrats, mainly not be opposition party. And the only person who stood up for Medicare, for example, Al Green out of Texas, the congressman who walks with a cane, and he was the only one to say, don't touch Medicare, which is something that Americans fought long and hard for back in the 40s or after the Great Depression. He was the only one. And what happened? They censured him within 24 hours, and Democrats voted to censure him. So this is how I know we have no democracy. We don't.
What do we do? Because I think about this 92%. I think about Black women saying, you know what? We did what we needed to do once again, and now we're tired. We're going to sit this out. We're going to let whatever happen. Like that seems to be a big narrative online that I'm seeing and have seen since the election. Knowing also that doesn't work either. Yes, rest is resistance. Rest is an important factor in the long term. However, inside of all of this tragedy, inside of all of this pain and this hurt, trying to find the power, trying to find the solution still has to happen. But how do we do that when we know that this fight feels like it's on us? The weight is on our shoulders.
The difference now for me is that whereas I would advocate for lots and lots of people, okay, and take it on, almost like part of my heartbreak when I was talking about heartbreak earlier was that I took on that burden on behalf of a lot of people who did not join as partners, equal partners in all this. Yeah. I felt responsible for American democracy, like on my own shoulders. And I don't have that delusion anymore. But there are a lot of things that we can do. And Black women are starting to have a lot of conversations. I'm sure you're in conversations. I will just share the things that I think, like I'm talking to a lot of very thoughtful, brilliant, strategic organizers and leaders. And a lot of the conversations we're having are closed door conversations because we're figuring things out. One is that we don't want to abandon our community, and we should define community the way that feels comfortable. Like for me, we don't want to abandon the vulnerable in our society that whose EBT cards and food stamps are being cut, they're talking about eliminating huge swaths of Medicare and then Medicaid, zeroing out Medicaid in the budget, and people not being able to get health care. And all of these people losing their jobs who had federal funding, nonprofits and federal employees, that hits a lot of people who are now more and more vulnerable. So we don't want to abandon them. And so I'm getting a lot of my inspiration from people who are talking about building mutual aid networks. There's a lot to that, but basically creating circles of trust in which you share resources in an informal way, mutual aid networks. And I'm hearing a lot of people do that. I'm involved with, I don't know if you heard about State of the People. There was a 24-hour broadcast that we did. We started midnight before Trump's joint session address all the way to midnight that night with Black commentators, experts, organizers, that kind of thing. We did programming for 24 hours. And we have to create our own ways of communicating and understanding this moment that cannot be taken from us as a platform, or and all these people who have their own platforms built up. I'm seeing a lot of people come together for that. That's been my particular role, is providing commentary, working with reporters. But right now, Washington Post is owned by Bezos, and they're not talking about issues in the way that we need them. New York Times as well, Politico as well. MSNBC fired its major, Joanne Reed, and Asian American and Latino spokespeople. So we are seeing mainstream media not have it. So I think we're going to build a parallel. And then I think there's going to be a lot of other kinds of organizing. It won't look like the civil rights struggle of the 60s. It won't look like the 30s. It won't look like Reconstruction. It's going to look like something else. And I'm still learning, and I'm looking at the youngest generation, like our kids' age, and I'm looking for the heroes also of the younger folks who have gone through, this is their second Trump term. They've gone through economic hardship. They've gone through COVID. They're not built like us, okay? And they have a lot to offer. And their leadership, I'm looking for right now too. What are their ideas? And I just think we stay connected and stay in conversation. Our grandparents, great-grandparents, and beyond that lived through worse. They lived through worse. And so for us, it's like there's a fascist in the White House. They've taken over. They're going to hurt a lot of people. And the U.S. has a long history of genocide, enslavement. There's a long history of that, and we can't fool ourselves. And yet, the whole time, there were Black women who figured out how to make things better and help who they can. That's who I'm trying to channel right now.
I've heard a lot of folks say that we've been here before, we've been in these struggles before, we can do it again. And I understand that, but also knowing that we've been here before, and whatever before looked like, I want to try to figure out and strategize how we don't end up here again. Is it possible to move enough steps forward that it doesn't feel like we're always rewinding back into the past? And that feels, it's a stupid dance that I don't want to do, that I don't have the rhythm for. And it got me to thinking about Justice Ketanji, how hard her job must be right now. Thinking about her, not as his legacy, not as his first Black woman on the Supreme Court, but as a human being, as a woman, a mother, a wife, a person, and how exhausted she must be, and what it even means to be in that workplace. I can't wrap my head around the pressure that she feels or could feel from this time in which she has been appointed to be appointed into the hellfires, is what it feels like.
And there's a lot of us who are in that same spot.
I think that's just hard to think about. Trying to figure out, thinking about the future. What do you hope for? What do you hope the next decade brings?
It's such a big question, because I have on my whiteboard, I've been doing a lot of visioning for myself. And I don't think I have a good answer for everyone. I can only talk about myself. And This next decade, I want health and wellness for myself. When I was saying like my diet, my nutrition, water, weightlifting, managing stress, I need to prioritize those because I feel like I've given everything to this country to the point of stressing myself out, getting burnout, personally subsidizing work that I'm not being paid what I'm worth, and just all of that. And I want health. From now till I'm 65, I want to be like badass and great health. And I think that's a good foundation for me. And then what I want for myself and what I'm working on are creative projects. I'm writing. The reason I can tell you about my earliest memories, but that lynching photo, is because I've been spending time with myself. I went to writing retreats. I spend time alone. I reflect. I take notes. What do you remember? And I think it's helpful in this moment for me to be engaged in that work, because the work, all it was and it is important. It wasn't for nothing. And I want to make sure to write everything that I can. And maybe I'll make some of my writings available so that the next generation that picks up the mantle learns the lessons that we've learned and moves forward. And I also I want to experience living in other places. I never really gave myself the freedom to do that before. I have a lot of friends. Some of them are looking at Europe, and the relationship of Europe and the US is changing. So we have to, and they were the originators of the slave trade. So we also need to know about that. Okay. So there's no like perfect place. But some people that I know moved to Johannesburg and found jobs down there. Some people I know are in Dubai and other places. And I'm not saying any one of those places is where I'm going to live permanently, but I sure would like in the next 10 years to see much more of the world. And, I want to be free. Like, all we wanted was liberation. The whole time, Black women fought for liberation, for our own liberation. And I remember at She the People, we did a poll. And like Black women, it wasn't just freedom, like freedom in the way that has been twisted in the US. They want liberation. And I'm a free Black woman. I want to live like that. I want to live free. I want financial freedom. I want freedom of movement. I want to be free to say what I think is important. And I want to be free, live free so that next generation can also be free. Is that crazy to say that? That's
Not
how I
at
feel.
all. It's not at all the idea of what we've been fighting for, struggling for, what the blood, the sweat, and the tears that are buried into this soil has all been to be free, to have autonomy over their own selves, to be able to raise their families, to be able to have children or not have children, to be able to keep our families together, to be able to live where we feel safe and have access to resources. Like, these are basic necessities, like water and air. Yeah, you have to fight for it. And that's the hard pill to swallow, that we have to fight for basic necessities and resources. I think that I am also a person who thinks heavily about what it means to be a global citizen. And I've talked about it with people over the years, and there are folks who are like, oh, that just means you're running away. And there's nowhere that's perfect, as you said, because there's not. But also, there also has to be a place that's easier. I don't know that I'm looking for the land of milk and honey. I'm looking for the soft life that the young kids say. I'm looking for a space where I don't have to fight so hard or try so hard all the time. But it does make me wonder, how can we have this soft life, and how can we be in this place? And if this place is not in America, how do we still help fight for the folks who are here, who do stay, who can't leave, who have less options? Because leaving the situation is still here. And is it our responsibility
These are big questions now because our identity was based on that. And now a lot of us, I mean, you hear me talking, should it be based on that? I'm thinking about, I've just been talking about my great-grandparents. They were enslaved in Central Tennessee by this human trafficker, enslaver named Tom Browning. And after the Civil War, they never got government handouts at 40 acres and a mule. We all know that did not happen.
And a
That
special
was an
thank you to
idea.
Grove GT Teague and Eno
I think General Grant had that. He promised people this if they would join the Union Army to help defeat the Confederacy, but it didn't materialize. But my great-grandparents had a farm. They bought with their own money, no help from the government. And they had it until Reconstruction. They sold away the ideas of Reconstruction and withdrew federal protections. And when that happened, white farmers threatened to kill everybody in the family, and they had to leave. Now, where were they going? They went north, and they were refugees trying to get into Canada. So why am I saying that? It isn't crazy for us. It's logical for us to find a place where our basic humanity is not challenged this way. And Americans, when you get in touch with how anti-Black it is, and how even people who are immigrating here, not just from Europe, okay? Like the Irish, the Italians, the Filipinos, the Chinese, the Central Americans who just came in the last year. People understand at some level, in order to access the American dream, you have to be anti-Black. Now, some people reject that, and those are the people I have been organizing with and working with. But a lot of people understand that is America, is anti-Blackness. And once we understand that, it's hard to accept. But once we accept the deep hatred for Black people in the systemic ways, then we can decide to stay, but we understand that the system would have to be broken down all the way down for us to deal with white supremacy. And other places have the problem of colonialism and white supremacy as well. It gives us more of a view so we can decide where we want to fight. But what I don't want us to do is to say it's our responsibility now, because we did what we could do to hold a vision for this country and to fight. I know you have done amazing work to fight to make sure that people were engaged in democracy, and we held that vision. And the fact that many people not only didn't come along with us, but actively defeated it shows how deep. It's not a political problem, it's a cultural problem with this place. So I don't want us to feel like it's on us. It isn't. It isn't. It probably never was, but we always took that responsibility. We took more responsibility. But in a democracy, it's everyone's responsibility. So then I want Black people, Black women especially, to ask themselves what would make them happy, fulfilled, and to feel free. And if you're like me and you're like, oh, asking myself that seems selfish, because we were taught to give everything up, everything, all of our brilliance, all of our talent, all of our resources in service to a thing which half of this country does not want. And so we just have to figure out where, if we want to continue that work, let us go forward with open eyes. Let us think about other ways. I mean, we're moving into our government is different now, okay? I believe the checks and balances period of American history is over. Now, maybe it can be brought back from the brink like they did in Brazil, where they had a Trump-like figure. And then thanks to a lot of organizing amongst Black women in Brazil, they were able to elect Lulu, and other countries have done that. Maybe that's possible. But it's not the only future for Black women. I want us to be free to choose our future. I want us to, if you want to pick the soft life and you want to get paid what you're worth, pursue it. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you. And that is reproductive justice.
Listen, I have so much love for Black women, so much gratitude for the people who lived before us and the people right now. I have so much gratitude. And I'm not a joiner of exclusive clubs. And, Black women have a lot of exclusive groups. And so I'm not members of those things. That hasn't been me. But the part that I'm so grateful for is a sense of belonging the sense of vision, the brilliance, this utter brilliance, the love. There's so much love. And if I could do anything right now, I would express so much love to Black people, and particularly Black women, so much gratitude. I would say to every single one, there's over 20 million of us, I would say, I see you, and you've always mattered, and you come from a great people, and you have great things yet to come. And if I could say that to everybody and say, we haven't figured out everything, but we will. And give ourselves grace, take care of our health, take care of our heart, and then let's move forward and know that because the thing that we tried to make happen didn't happen doesn't mean that we can't make other things happen.
I knew this was going to be a great conversation, but there is something about you, your voice, your experience, and your knowledge that is soothing. And I know for a fact that others will feel this soothing balm that you have given us, especially Black women who feel unsure and stuck. And not that anyone needed permission to put the torch down or to relax, but your voice and your wisdom is certainly an invitation to do as such. And so I am grateful and thankful to know you and to be in good company with you and to be in this work, whatever this work looks like next week, next year, next 10 years. And I'm sure we'll run into each other again somewhere in an airport in Brazil. I'll try to get to South Africa. I can't get there on Thursday, but I'm going to get there. And yeah, I just whatever is next, I know we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. Thank you, Aimee. I really do appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for being on Sticky Note Conversations. And I hope you'll come back. I hope we'll have more like super dope stuff to talk about, whatever it is that you're going to be working on next.
Love it.
And when those writings come together into a brilliant book that we can all read, we can talk about that too, because I see that coming. I feel that coming.
Thank you, Erika. You're really special. Thank you for having me and being in conversation. It heals my heart every time I am able to say the things. And thank you so much.
Y'all, this has been another episode of Sticky Note Conversations. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington. With editing by Black Gypsy LLC and Simone Endres. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy.